Squid Game has the craziest games, from the tug-of-war of death to jumping through glass straight to the gates of heaven, all the way to musical chairs on steroids. And it made me wonder, out of all this craziness, which game is actually the deadliest? And not just based on what seems the most deadly, but by actually grabbing a calculator and using science. And let me tell you, some of them are way deadlier than you might expect, and some which seem diabolical at first are actually kind of vanilla. And to keep the ranking a mystery till the end, let's go over them in random order. And there is even a game you didn't even know was being played in Squid Game, so stay tuned. Let's start with red light, green light, and trust me, I actually went on a random spinning wheel website and this game came out first. No cap. In this game, the contestants had no idea about how evil and messed up these games were, so when the first bullets were fired, everybody panicked, leading to a huge bloodbath. Gi-hun and the boys made it, but some of the last players were slower than snails and got killed once the timer ran out. This was by far the highest number of eliminations in a game, which definitely made Big Daddy the frontman very happy. As there were 456 contestants and 255 of them got absolutely finessed, our death-o-meter score is coming in at 55.92%. This means that even though it was kinda lethal and shocking, it's not as lethal as you would expect. But as everyone knows, in science, you want to test multiple times. So let's hop straight into this game the second time around. In Season 2, the game had a way higher survival rate than the original, even though Miss Nightmare Doll was strapped and equipped with upgrades. Gi-hun snitched and alerted the players ahead of time that their lives were at stake. Even with this in mind though, 91 players were still killed, all starting from that one itsy bitsy bee. So technically a bee has killed 91 players in Squid Game.
다 움직였어.
That's a crazy thing to put on your tombstone. So Red Light Green Light's second edition has a mortality rate of 19.96%, with most players listening to Gi-hun and staying still when needed. Technically though, since the frontman hadn't taken part yet, one player was missing, meaning the true mortality rate was a flat 20%. So let's get down to the math. The first Red Light Green Light had a death rate of 55.92%, and the second time, it had a rate of 20% killed. This brings the game to an average of only 37.96% dead. So now let's look at the next game, which according to the wheel is a heartbreaking one full of lies and deception, which was far more deadly. Marbles is a really interesting but devastating game. Some of the most fascinating characters met their end here through pure deception and cruelty. You'd expect that it'd be a simple 50% rate of death, with 19 of the 38 players dying. But it's actually higher than this. There were only 39 living players at this point, so player 212 couldn't get a teammate. And some teams chose not to complete the game, probably unable to live with the guilt of what they would have done. It's later revealed that 212 was allowed to live, meaning the total mortality rate for this heartbreaking game was actually 56.41%, earning itself a spot above Red Light, Green Light. Even though this game wasn't 50-50 like the VIPs wanted, this was definitely the case in our next game, Tug of War. With 80 players alive at this point, it'd be too hard to get them in a huge 40 versus 40 pulling match. So they were divided into groups of 10, each person playing the tug of war of their lives, literally. Thanks to the design of the game, it was actually impossible for all teams to survive, and it was a forced 50% cutoff to make upcoming games easier to manage. 40 players died here, and this cruel test of strength ends up in the middle of our current list. A lower kill count, but pretty high death rate. Although this was a tough physical test, it was a very different kind from one game we saw in Season 2. The six-legged pentathlon. Considering it was made out of children's activities, this game was surprisingly stressful. Since each team member had to succeed at their activity while still giving their teammates enough time to do theirs, it was a very disturbing thing to experience. I mean, imagine you've aced your challenge and you're waiting for a grandma to clear a 360 no-scope trick shot. She then of course fails because of high blood pressure, and this whole time you were just standing there waiting for your sudden and shocking death. 110 players were killed in this game, even more than the red light, green light of this season. But since there were 365 players present, the huge number of death was only a 30.14% mortality rate, taking its spot on the bottom of our list. Using kids' games to torture players is one thing, but when candy's involved, well then you're really cooking. Dalgona, aka the cookie licking challenge. Delicious street food from half a century ago can't possibly kill you, right? Well, we all know how the contestants got screwed with this one. We'd all wish to get a nice, simple shape like a triangle, but Gi-hun somehow pulled through and made it with a frickin' umbrella. Not everyone was so lucky though. 79 out of the 187 remaining players broke their candy or were lacking and didn't escape in time. That's a 42.25% mortality rate, making Dalgona take the current bronze medal. But this next game might surprise you, because there is a game a lot of people overlook. Ddakji is a game played by every single contestant. Although at this point the contestants have not been assigned a number yet, it is technically a game played. And as you might have guessed, this game takes the last place with a death rate of 0%, but it is an honorable mention with a 100% slap rate. And that brings me straight to another game you didn't know was played, Russian roulette. This game was played twice. The salesman took a go at it, and with him taking the first click, week. There were 3 contestants, of which 1 died, making it a 33% death rate, and he later played a 1v1 against Gi-hun and accidentally unalived himself, making it another 50% death rate. This averages us out at a 41.5% death rate, making it an honorable mention ending above the first season's red light, green light, and the second season's 6-legged pentathlon. So yeah, kinda insane. Which brings us back into the arena with Mingle. This game was as brutal as it was tragic, with players like Young Mai and Jae Sok being eliminated along with 153 others. But not everyone was killed by the guards, with player 1 savagely killing player 343 in order to keep himself and Jung Bae safe inside their room. The first round of this game actually went pretty well, with only 35 deaths. The real problem came in the second round, where 52 lives were lost, and from there it was downhill, with more and more players dropping like flies. Luckily, Thanos made it out though, although he did backstab one of his own after a rock-paper-scissors tournament. In total, 60.78% of the playing contestants were eliminated, making this the most lethal game so far. However, you could say the deadliest game was the game with the least contestants, which brings us to Squid Game. With Se-byuk being injured from a previous game, she was bleeding out, and Gi-hun begged the guards to help save her. While he was distracted though, Sang-woo betrayed the gang by stabbing her in the neck, causing her to die in third place. This is one of the only times that one player directly killed another one out of nowhere, and it led to the epic showdown in the final match, Squid Game. After an extremely emotional duel against Sang-woo, Gi-hun earned his victory, but refused to claim it, trying to find a way for both of the final players to escape alive. But it wasn't possible, and Sang-woo self-eliminated so that Gi-hun could win. This means that the final event of the 33rd Squid Game saw a mortality rate of either 50% or 66%, depending on if you count the Sang-woo demon mode murder outside of the game. I'd say because the actual game only started with 2 contestants, this should be placed at 50%, making it a tie with Tug of War. But if even the final game of the season wasn't the most deadly, what was? Glass Bridge. We all knew it had to come at some point. The Glass Bridge was by far the most evil and deadly game we've seen in the franchise. Now, believe it or not, the players of this game were really unlucky. Fans have calculated that on average 7 or more players would usually survive, but the group we saw actually play it were just having a rough match of bad luck, which was probably caused by Deok-soo, his shenanigans, and Sang-woo going even further into demon mode. Out of the 16 players who took part in this round, 13 of them met a terrifying end, but we can at least be thankful that Minyo took Deok-soo down with her. This game had a massive 81.25% mortality rate, making it the most fatal by a long shot. But let's take a look at some of the later ones to finish up. The election. Just like in Season 1, the Season 2 Squid Games held a vote where Gi-hun tried to convince everybody to call off the game so that they could safely return to their homes. As voting is a gaming element, you could say this is actually a game. Of course, though, humans are very greedy, and when the vote was split 50-50, one group attacked the other during Lights Out. In this attempt to rig the election to stay in the games, 27 players out of the 95 who were present were killed in the brutal brawl, where they were either beaten to death or stabbed with forks. This event had a mortality rate of 28.42%, making it 9th in our list. Alongside another instance of voting causing a fatal fight, Gi-hun started plotting a crazy plan to end the games once and for all without killing any innocents, which brings us to not really a game, but let's just call it the Chaos Arc. Prior to the attempt to rig the votes, a smaller scale effort was made by Thanos to get a weaker player to switch sides, aiming to continue the games. He gathered a group together to beat and intimidate the would-be quitter, but more objectors arrived, leading to a massive brawl which ended in 5 fatalities, including Thanos himself. Although according to my comment section, we are not sure if Thanos actually died. Bathroom brawls are never pleasant, but when weapons are involved, all bets are off. 5 players died here, which was a 20% mortality rate of those in the room. But of course, there were many players who didn't take part, so it comes down to just 5% in total. Following this and the larger scale voter war, a rebellion was staged by a small group of players led by Gi-hun, who tried to take the frontman hostage and end the Squid Games by force. The group ambushed some guards and stole their weapons while they tried to break up the vote rigging. The group tried shooting their way through the complex but was ultimately unsuccessful since the frontman was in their group all along and ruined their plans completely, plotting against them from the start. The guards were also far better armed and had more men, leading to them gradually killing most of the players. Although 9 players were killed, which is 75% of the group of rebels, there were still 56 players who didn't take part in this plot, meaning the mortality rate was only 13.23% as a whole. Combining this with the stats from the bathroom, however, we have a total mortality rate of 9.7%, ending up somewhere down there on the bottom of the list. So there you have it, guys. This is the final ranking from easy peasy lemon squeezy all the way up to almost instant death, including every game I could find. If you want to see more Squid Game theories, make sure to click the video on screen now.